Tearing across the vox waves of Innsmouth Hive like screaming skulls of obsidian wreathed in green hellfire. We are the Bolter Wine of Acoustic Mayhem, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio. Coming to you live tonight from Ricketts Graveboards.
Because who doesn't need a hobby? And a death trap. Speaking of death traps, the Corridor 54 killer has struck again, leaving a trio of headless administratum marshals outside the Arbites Hall of Justice on sub-level 2.
Oof, that's almost personal.
Man, I swear every time we think he's gone, he just comes on back.
He just keeps coming.
Again and again.
Keeps popping up everywhere.
It's like a show that's been canceled a couple of times, and you just... Wait, they're making more? As my grandpappy once said, a little arson in the morning goes a long way. I am your neon-crusted axe aficionado, Goblin King. Joining me is your co-pilot, the Mauler Maniac of Sublevel 999 himself, Marky.
What it is, hoes.
Helping us ply the endless insanity of the Underhive, it's the Chain Fist Maestro of the Frost Hollow himself, ChuckerFly.
Just a little bit of advice: if you start bleeding, just snort some more.
You clog it up. It's like a coagulant.
Yeah, it'll clot.
Clotting warp dust is clotting powder. And our source for all things that give you teeth, the purveyor of all of the red squig we can consume in the field, it's Kev.
Red squig!
What do they call that stuff? Quick clot? Like
Clot.
Yeah.
Just powdered warp stone, just fucking...
quick stone? Quick dust?
Quick dust. Quick dust.
I think in Warhammer, the gangers would probably just call it plug dust.
Plug dust.
I like
Yeah,
that.
plug your holes.
Plug into your
In the
holes.
Felix and Gotrek novels, a lot of it deals with like the Skaven and different warp stuff. So they talk about warp stone a lot, and the fact that like people crush warp stone up and they put it in their snuff box, like they mix it with tobacco.
Yeah.
And they're like, why do I have a tentacle growing out of my chest? And it's like, well, maybe it's because you're fucking ingesting warp stone.
I have a theory. Drugs.
Drugs. And then the great part is the Skaven just fucking eat it and like nothing happens to them. They're just like, yeah, it's fine, whatever. Just rub it in your eyes. It's fine.
I feel
Are
like
the
there's like a
Skaven
gang.
just immune to it, or is their tolerance really high? Because I know they get fucked up eventually.
So from the episode 1 of Under the Realms of Madness, go back a couple weeks if you want to listen to that.
No, I was there for it. I remember we talked about it.
I
I
was
just don't
talking
remember.
I was talking
for
to the
the other
listeners,
ones.
Kevin. I was talking to the
Right.
listeners.
Right. I thought you were talking to me. I'm like, I was there, Gandalf. I was there 3 episodes ago.
I was there, Gandalf. But I think since Beastmen and Skaven were born of Warpstone meteors, I think they've got like a higher tolerance, essentially.
Yeah, because like I know the Beastmen can get like more fucked up and corrupted. And
Oh yeah, the Skaven can too, because the Skaven
and that there are all kinds of
use it.
Nurgle Plague Skaven and stuff
It's
like
just-
that.
It's just like taking a protein shake or some kind of high end testosterone or something, I guess, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I take my Warpstone supplement every morning.
What if there's like a warpstone butt plug? You know, like the little
I was
gem.
about to say, I
thing.
thought you took your Warpstone whenever Daddy told you to bend over.
Like you've seen those, the little gems.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Warpstone.
Seen one. There's probably at least no.
Are you looking that up right now?
No, I'm just looking up Warpstone.
I mean, if you're
Brian,
on, you get
I'm
to
looking
see what
over
he's
my
about to look
shoulder
up.
because that's the direction that it at least this many exist. This many plus.
Only the
are in
patrons
that
get to see
direction.
how many butt plugs Kevin has.
Wow, Kevin, that's a lot of butt plugs. How do you even sit?
I never said they were for mine. I am married.
So they're
There you
hers,
go.
but they're for you. So again, how do you even sit?
No, scroll.
They
go
have
down
the-
a little bit. Look,
Hey,
Marky,
we
there's one
share.
right there
This
in
is
the
an
photo.
equal household.
Right next to- okay, there you go.
This
This
one?
one right there, Marky.
That's sick. So yeah, they have like those training butt
that's
plugs.
dope.
You know, you can walk around with them, and like so
that
it doesn't
looks a
fall out of your
little
ass.
pointy. But I did like how it did have the tickler on that one. Oh, that one's got
Wow.
a tickler too.
Wow.
You're just mad that I was able to work that into the joke.
No, I'm surprised. I'm in awe of what's going on here.
That one's ribbed for pleasure. That's a good
Wow.
one.
You see, we got the purity seal going on.
We don't. That's the thing. There is no purity seal at the moment.
Not
I
this
think
episode,
the whole
I guess.
episode is purity seal. We should just purity seal the whole channel.
I hear it's
Just
a
kidding.
cure for hemorrhoids. You know, it shrinks hemorrhoids.
Warpstone. Yeah.
You just
I
put it in
mean-
your butt.
Did your friendly local clan Molder tell you that? Yes, Warpstone's good for hemorrhoids. Yes. Just sit on this pillow. It will fix you up.
Does it mean the warpstone is warm?
Sure.
I would imagine it feels like holding uranium.
Oh my god.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say it's probably
probably.
like radiation. Yeah,
Yeah,
probably
probably.
feels warm. You ever put your face
Does
next
that-
to a
does that
microwave?
make-
Probably something similar.
I felt
Does that
radiation.
make
It wasn't that warm.
Mordenheim the analog for Chernobyl?
I mean, it happened in 1999, so
Is that the analog that they drew? Because I mean, almost everything in Warhammer has a because it's always like some kind of parody of current. Well, not
Warpstone
current, but
is
something
Warpstone is definitely like
like uranium,
like Marvel comic version of what radiation does.
Yeah,
Because
it's-
real radiation just makes all your
Just murders
teeth fall
you.
out and you
it
die.
just you die. There's
you
no
don't
this.
grow extra limbs and like create crazy pseudoscience gadgets.
Oh man, when my dad explained that to me, I was so like sad as a child.
You're like, yeah,
It's like,
you
what do you
can't
mean it
gamma.
doesn't? He's
You
like, no,
can't gamma ray
radiation just
burst yourself. Yeah,
He's like, no, radiation, it doesn't give you new things. It just destroys DNA and then it
Yeah.
falls apart from there.
Why
And
am I
it's just
bleeding
all
out
bad.
of my asshole?
because
Oh,
you're
no.
sitting on a warpstone.
So
Plug.
But my hemorrhoids are gone.
You guys are talking about this like, oh yeah, just sit on a warpstone thing, and
Oh my
it reminded
God.
me of this story that I read because out of one of
Wow.
my dad's books when he was working at the nuclear power plant.
Like some
Oh,
smut.
I was like, where are we going here?
No,
Sorry.
no,
Got some old smut from his pops.
no.
Yeah,
it
that's
was
the best kind of spot.
like cautionary
smut.
tales of radiation and nonsense like that. So essentially, this guy went and put a part of an X-ray in his back pocket. Didn't know that it was incredibly radioactive because this is early days of X-ray technology and
So
stuff.
his butt
And
sloughed off.
his ass fell off.
Literally, his ass fell off like in a matter of hours.
Oh, wow.
So you could say he had no ass at all.
Yeah, no ass at all.
So I don't know if you've ever seen this,
But like, it's crazy. Like, and then to think like, oh yeah, these guys are just like, oh here, let me take this warp stone. Like, it's like, oh
Yeah.
yep, that somebody would totally do that. And then they would
people
get a
did.
tentacle growing out of their butt.
People 100% like back in the day, people would take fucking radiation pills because it was good for you. Because we didn't know.
No,
Yeah.
I'm safe. I have my lead armor. I'm safe.
my asbestos lined
Don't
fire
worry, I got
retardant
my-
lead armor.
I got my asbesties.
Hey,
It's the besties.
So have you guys ever seen this diagram where it's like a radiation pool and it describes like where the danger is, and you would think like all of the water is most of the water is less radioactive than the air
Oh, yeah.
outside the pool. Just don't get near the rods. Like
Absolutely.
you're fine until you're near the rods.
Yeah, actually, a guy fell in one of the pools at San Onofre once,
Yeah,
and they sent him home in an entire suit made out of paper.
I used to have a buddy who worked contamination cleanup for
For
reactors,
Sano. Yeah.
and like they moved. He never stayed at one. They moved him all around.
Okay.
And when
He
he was
probably
at
followed the outages.
the way that the company worked was they deployed you for 6 months to certain regions.
Oh, well, yeah, but that's probably during the outage.
Maybe.
They probably contract
Um,
extra cleanup crews during the refueling process, which is what an outage is.
Oh, maybe. I don't know. But he said at one point when he was at San Onofre, somebody dropped a wrench into the tank and they were like, we're not getting it.
Well,
Like
Ever.
that's
my
staying
dad
there.
told me something about that, and it was just like it was the biggest nightmare because it's like, well, the only way to get it out is to shut it down.
Yeah, they would have to shut the reactor down. Yeah, and
It
the,
just
like
wasn't
the
worth
cleanup
it.
guy, the cleanup guys were like, "We're just not going to get it. Like that's the answer. The answer
That's
is
the answer.
no
Is
one's
we're just
going to
going to
go
leave
get
it
it."
there. We're just
Yeah,
going to leave it
it's-
there until we have to refuel the whole reactor and take it apart
Yep.
for maintenance, anyways. So it's
That guy's
just gonna
like,
stay
that's
there.
my favorite wrench.
That's my
favorite
It's too
wrench.
fucking
my
bad.
favorite fucking wrench, man.
Dude, I
Too
just spent
fucking bad.
$35 on that fucking wrench. Why can't I get it back?
My wife bought me that wrench for our anniversary.
That's
You
my
fucking
special.
dropped it.
That's my special Black and Decker Cobalt wrench or
I got
whatever other.
I got it painted after my favorite football team. Like, come on, man.
That's my dual-purpose butt plug wrench.
That's my Warpstone butt plug wrench.
Oh my god.
My butt stone
my
wrench.
my Warpstone assisted butt plug wrench.
That's when you don't have any more room on your tool
This
belt.
is
you
this
put it
is
in
like
your ass.
the absolute
Oh, man.
longest
Dumb
fuck around time
conversation.
before the actual intro.
It's actually episode 6.95 right now. All of a
Right,
sudden.
I'm trying.
Right?
I'm still wound up from last time.
So welcome to Tales from the Hive, The Rot Wars. In this episode, we will reveal some of the methods and tools we used in crafting the narrative behind Gymdark's first community campaign, The Rot Wars. If you guys aren't aware of what that is and you are listening to us now in April of 2023, run on over to our Discord server and get involved today. If you guys have found this later on, the missions should be available for you guys to access and play anytime you want in 10th edition or 11th edition or 13th edition, whatever edition it is. And we have made a commitment that all of our streamed games, as we talk about streamed games throughout the episode, all those streamed games will turn into VODs and those VODs. We're supposed to video on demand VODs, all those VODs, those VODs, whatever the fuck I'm supposed to say. Those will all end up on our YouTube page, so you can check that stuff out and you can catch up on what these guys have done on stream. But we hope you're hearing it in April of 2023 and you'll run on over and get involved in the community campaign, because the more players we have, the more epic it will be.
That is correct.
Well, a lot of yes, that is correct. Sorry, Chuck.
I derailed you. Sorry.
It's cool.
I tend to do that with you.
Well, there are a lot of structured examples, talks, and tips out there when it comes to crafting a campaign or setting up a narrative crusade. It can also be extremely daunting to start. Much like any other style of creative writing, the endless expanse of possibility and blank space is both a blessing and an absolute fucking curse. Even in writing the notes for this episode, with a lot of the knowledge of the campaign in mind, we all found it hard to really sit down and define what makes up the first few steps of the process. Something we could define and lay out to help you guys when you get about designing your own campaigns.
Yep. It is a little difficult to start coming up with ideas out of nowhere.
Yeah. And the best usually is to brainstorm with your group. Even if you're, say you're going to take it to your like local shop, but you've got a couple of guys that play with each other. Like you've got like your close knit circle that plays at the shop. Get those 2 or 3 people, sit down at Denny's after a game night, or, Arby's or whatever, taco shop,
local
whatever you're
gentlemen's
doing.
club, whatever you want.
Yeah, local gentleman's club, the steakhouse, wherever it is, the whiskey and cigars. However, you sit around after your game and then just kind of start brainstorming ideas, and that's really how we started. Chuck and I and Marky and Tom, and even realistically everybody except Matt had like some ideas.
He's throwing ideas in for the system.
Everybody except Matt. Matt is very much our, like, we rely on him for rules guys. We're just teasing him.
He's got to have the parchment in hand already written for him.
Yeah. We all sat down and we just kind of started throwing ideas at the wall and sort of saw what stick. But there is a process to it, and as we've talked in past creative writing episodes, past Tales from the Hive episodes and stuff like that, we kind of try to lay out what that process is. We floundered around a lot, which definitely helps that brainstorming session. If there is a rule 0 that is outside the 5 steps we'll talk about, that rule 0 is brainstorming with your friends. And realistically, take these 5 steps and then toss them into that brainstorming session.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
The process can be broken down into a basic outline of 5 steps: the theme, the world building, the campaign structure, scenarios and story arcs, and lastly, the end game. while we will focus on how to apply these to designing Warhammer 40k Crusade narratives and use the development of our own community campaign as a living example, we did try to design this outline in a way that it could be used for any war or skirmish game, or even your tabletop role-playing games, or any other story design game that you might be working on, or any other game with story design elements you might be working on.
Yeah, so like the theme. What is our theme? Just having a good time, and I mean, it's really what it is. It's having a good time and getting everybody to play, and like always, Chaos versus Imperium is the main thing.
and that's really how
that is the main story for Warhammer. But yeah,
we'll get into some examples here in a second, but it really is one of those things. Like, the theme doesn't have to be directly tied to the mechanics of the game.
No.
So Chuck, as you brought up, the first step is the theme. And although we could also easily refer to this as the genre of the campaign. So you could say theme or genre depending on what you're doing. And genre might be a word that helps unlock more possibilities for you if you're designing something that isn't necessarily for Warhammer 40k. Depending on how you're looking to develop your own campaign, this is the first step in deciding at times what game system you might be playing. As an example, you might decide on a high fantasy theme at this stage. And that would, if we had done that, that would have switched us to looking at Age of Sigmar or possibly the old world of Warhammer as a mechanic base for the game right off the bat. However, the theme or genre does not have to have any impact on the game system.
It can be any of the other game systems that are out there, and taking all the factions and deciding the ones that you like, running with them.
Right.
Your own stories within that universe.
With the Rot Wars, the game system and the mechanics we're using is the 9th edition of Warhammer 40k. So we know the rules, and we know that one of the overall themes, as Chuck pointed out, is going to be war. Epic conflict between two, I should say, or more sides. But we could shift the lens of that theme pretty easily. It could be set in the Horus Heresy, for example, which brings about its own set of overtones and themes. Or it could be a tale of Eldari Corsairs and Chukari Raiders plaguing a Tau spacing lane, allowing us to play with pirate themes if we wanted to run a pirate 40k campaign. Much like how Kill Team Gallowdark has focused on intense firefights between ragged survivors and a decayed Space Hulk, which implies lots of post-apocalyptic themes. Or how setting a campaign during the events of the Siege of Vrax allows players to really get into the themes of trench warfare and things that surrounded both the First and Second World War.
Yeah, themes can really be like the area where you can have fun with it, I think. The theme of, endless orcs is always fun, endless Tyranids, and then you have your
the
little side
stand.
the last stand theme, which is always a fun one.
And you don't always have to just pick one and go ham on one. You can treat it like a multi-entree, 3-entree plate from Tiny's Takeout, and you can go, okay, we're going to take some endless orcs, and we're going to put it on top of some of this over here, and mix and match. Take what you want.
And then you can also apply themes to the scenarios themselves, which we'll get into a little bit later on. A really classic example of a theme being applied to a game that kind of like the game stays completely the same, but the entire tone of it shifts would be I think it's called Innistrad now, but it used to be Raven. No, it is Ravenloft. Innistrad is the Magic the Gathering version. So Ravenloft in D&D, Dungeons and Dragons is very much this high fantasy concept game and all this stuff. It was very, very much, elves, dwarfs, orcs, Tolkien fantasy. It was very, very much J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to slice it, that's really what the core D&D experience was. When Ravenloft came out, Ravenloft put this entire dark gothic vampire theme over the entire game. It was still D&D. There were still dwarves, there were still elves, there were still classes, there was still leveling up, there was still adventure pass. Everything mechanically stayed the same. However, now everything was underneath this vampire overlord tone, which changed the theme of the game without changing the game itself. And in a lot of ways, that's what we're doing with the Rot Wars, because we're leaning very deeply into the grimdark and horror themes of the Warhammer world, of the 42nd millennium. An easy fit for this story is our group has often found that we have a tendency to brainstorm or tell as we're talking. You know, the last stands, the endless horde games kind of fall into more of the horror side, more of the grimdark side. The name itself also implies that there will be a little bit of Nurgle grossness, from cultists and poxwalkers to Marky's, to I almost said to zombies' favorite Marky, to Marky's favorite zombies and the plague of unbelief. We have a lot to play with just from the word association of the Rot Wars. Secondly, since this campaign is designed to allow those in our community to play alongside the campaign games being played on stream by us, we have a theme of massive battles. So just as Kevin said, you know, we didn't just pick horror, we picked horror and epic battles. We're really focusing on the actions that are happening on a different planet or in a different theater of combat are going to have implications across the entire sector.
Which, when everyone else plays, not on the stream and inputs or scores, will affect things going on with our games.
Yeah.
And vice versa. As these guys play out major story beats through the stream, we may get rid of an entire narrative branch that you guys will never even hear about. You guys will get the story, you'll get the lore dump, but there could be stuff that we pull in, that we unbolt from our structure based on how the games on stream go. So it flows both ways. However, it's mostly designed. Chuck, you've done a really good job designing most of it to be like whatever they do impacts you guys.
Yeah.
Makes your guys' life harder.
I mean, hey, that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So we don't have to design even a Warhammer 40k campaign to rely on massive battles, spanning parts of a solar system or even a subsector. You could very easily work in a smaller environment, looking at only the battles of one world. And nothing says you have to stick to the 40k rule set. You can bounce to Kill Team for smaller games or utilize Battlefleet Gothic for large fleet battles. So even within the campaign or the Crusade you're telling, you don't necessarily have to do Crusade rules or match play rules. You know, yeah, exactly. So we're sticking to one rule set. That doesn't mean that what you guys design has to stick to one rule set. You could even design your Crusade and campaign narratives, as I just mentioned, to follow along with and affect a role-playing game session that you might be running in a system like Dark Heresy or Only War.
And the cool part is it's going to affect the whole story.
And that's the aim. The aim is, how do you lay enough groundwork? How do you set up enough of a sandbox that there's a consistent flow to the game? Matched play has its own reward system, and narrative play has its own reward system. And the reward system and narrative play is going through the process of building that story with somebody.
Yeah, the one nice thing about 40k and 9th edition, which hopefully transfers over to the new edition of 40k, is the whole Crusade system and how it has like essentially a template for you to work with, and you can stick with that template or stray away from the template as much as you want. That's kind of the freedom that you have. So if you feel like the task of creating your own, campaign is daunting, you always have the Crusade system to fall back on as a template, as like a foundation. For people that have been playing forever, sticking to the same template for 20 something years or the same system for 20 something years, you're just kind of like, oh, I want to try something new, which is why like things like Endless Orcs or, Last Stands or, crazy Warp Storm fights where, random events happen, things blow up, meteors fall from the sky, the board gets smaller from, warp storms, like crap like that.
That reminds me of that one where you didn't tell us about having that one explodable tank behind the wall.
Yeah.
And then you teleported in the commandos or whatever and shot it up and blew a hole in the wall. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Things that aren't even like in the rules, like that you just want to include that are cool. Yeah, that's great for narrative play to mix it up.
Yeah, things where you can cross the line from 40k generic rules to more of like not RPG,
Movie.
RP style play
Yeah.
where there's a game master, and the game master's like, I'm going to roll a D20, and on a 15 or higher, there's going to be a battle barge falling out of the sky, and it's going to blow up half of the field or something. Anything on that side of the field is dead. Takes 100 mortal wounds. Something gnarly
dumb.
to where it's just like, holy hell, dude! Like that shit was crazy. Like
Mhm.
creating those memories or those those games
Those
where
story beats.
exactly
Yeah.
where it's just different. It's something different that you get a taste of that you wouldn't normally get from 40k. Again, when you play 40k for years and years on end, eventually playing 2,000 points of this versus that in jumping on an objective gets a little old, I guess, to some, maybe not all, but some people like the throw a little story in there, or change things up, or have things surprise them where you don't normally get to taste that. I know when Tom and I were playing every week for like 2-3 years on end, literally every week. So we'd play like 1-2 games every week, Friday nights, and we did that for years. And even just doing it over those few years that we did, having something to change it up was always nice. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
The one good thing about Games Workshop is they're pretty on top of updating rules, especially as of recent. And so when you do that, it changes things up and you get a little fresh taste of, something new. But again, it's nice to have some wild thing happen. I know when I played Ryan and we had the game with Eisenhorn and stuff jumping
right.
down, and it was just like crazy little stuff like that. You build those memories and it's nice.
Yeah. And there's nothing to say that you can't have a matched play game in that structure. In fact, the way that we've structured our community campaign, you guys will notice with the first mission that you've had play and the first mission these guys are about ready to jump into, they're essentially matched play games. We are starting off with a 2,000 point versus 2,000 point army. We're starting off with defined missions. We're using the 9th edition rules. We're using the Nephilim battle, grand tournament. What do they call the books? The grand tournament books?
Yeah,
The
something
battle
like that,
sector.
yeah.
That's the jumping off point, and it makes sense in the way that we're telling the story, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the next mission is going to be matched play for you guys or for these guys. It means, you bring in that flavor, so you can, as you design your campaigns, and we'll talk about this when we get into the campaign structure, you can say, okay, well, every, the first game and every third game after, or the first game and the last game, or the first game and the fourth game, or however you design it, is going to be just a match play game. You can kind of flow in and out and change things up as you do it. So the next step in the process is world building. No matter what setting and theme you are going to use, there is always a bit of world building that needs to go into the process. Even when setting out to use the Crusade rules, most often players will at least choose an area or the conflict their armies are fighting in. So even if you just say, okay, we're going to do a crusade, we're going to use the rule book, you guys are probably going to be like, we're setting it in the Badab War, or we're setting it during the Fall of Baal. You're going to pick something that acts as the world building step. It could be off the shelf. It could be something you come up with. This is a dangerous step because it can be tempting to flesh out the entire world you're going to be playing in. We talk about world building quite often on the podcast. It's a very core tool that we all use, and it's used in all sorts of the creative writing process that we try to outline and show to you guys. In this case, knowing what is enough to start, though, is incredibly important. Generally, it's best to start off small. What factions are going to be involved? What overall goal might each have? Is there an overarching antagonist, or does each faction act as an antagonist to all the others? Where will the story events take place? Where will the story arcs play out? Having major details mapped out so they can be referred to is important. Say you might want to toss in a relic of some long-lost guard regiment as an objective. Knowing that the planet of Delos Prime is within the sector might be important to the narrative. Knowing the mating rituals of the Delos Longfish, probably not important to the campaign that you're running. So you have to kind of pick and choose your battles and set limits on yourself so you don't end up spending 3 years designing the campaign, not playing it.
Unless you're going to throw in like
The mating rituals.
fauna coming in.
Longfish.
Yeah, they're extremely violent when they're during mating
the
season.
Yeah.
Just reminds me of Ace Ventura, like the little shaking bush, angry gorilla in the background.
Oh my
Sorry,
God.
it's their mating season.
It's their mating season. In our case, we have a bunch of world building already done. Since we have developed more of Innsmouth's lore throughout the podcast, we have started to fill out the Carcosan sector of Segmentum Obscurus. Our community has also helped to fill in some of that lore, adding their own worlds or suggesting weird locations and occurrences that might exist within the Carcosan sector itself. Also, the examples we have used in the past creative writing episodes all get tossed into that mix. So if we talk about something in an episode and we brainstorm out some weird planet, it's somewhere in the Carcosan sector because we already wrote it. From a strange world to a space Hulk, it's something that we can always use, pull out of that toolbox in the future. A lot of our tips come out of the basic rule that anything that we come up with gets saved for some future use. It's a great tip for any world building or writing. A lot of people will give you the advice when you start writing to write down your dreams. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you have a weird idea, immediately write it down. This is that same sort of idea. Now, Marky and I are bullshitting during a production meeting, and we're trying to toss around a planet that we want to bring to you guys, and we decide it's going to be a water world that's a penal colony. And then Tom brings up a couple of different things about how that water world's economy works. That's all stuff that we now have. We can name that planet, we can throw it in the Carcosan sector, and when we need a relic from a penal world or we need a unit from a penal world, we have something we can immediately pull from.
Yep. You bank them.
Exactly.
It's like, I don't know if it touches on this, but the little bit I've helped develop, you already had a legend on the subsector of what kind of planets, and I decided to fill in those types of planets.
Yep. And that legend on the subsector map is the pretty standard Warhammer 40k legend. I just made our own icons.
I just went, this is what I'm going to go with. Well, this needs this in the subsector. Haven't got any details on the planets, but based on what the legend says, pretty self-explanatory what it is.
Exactly.
Actually, one thing I was wondering, do we have a marker for my fleet? Like, do you have a map marker that just to show that it's here? Or is
you got to tell me?
Yeah,
you got to either tell me where its homeworld is, or you got to tell. Yeah, you tell me where it is, I'll add it
in the Carcosan sector. So I was just thinking it'd be funny just to like put it in as like a random spot, and just like put it in between two planets. Fleet.
So we do know why you're there.
Yeah, loot.
Teaser, it'll be in the opening crawl for stream episode 1.
Mm-hmm. It's not just loot. There's a story. I know.
Through the development of the subsector Kendari with Mullins, one of our long-standing patrons and community members, we set aside an entire region of space called the Rot Worlds. At the time, we had no idea what it would be used for, if it would ever be used. It was just an idea that this cluster of worlds was an endless war zone against the forces of Nurgle. What the Rot Worlds became was a great place to set a campaign in. This is also an example of using what you know, which was one of our how to get started in creative writing tips. Warhammer 40k lore is littered with references to fringe zones, halo stars, eastern fringes. All of these pockets of space where either it's too wild or too dangerous to settle, it's too unknown, or it's constantly beset with grinding conflict. The fun then becomes the why of it all, and it's a great focus for this level of world building. We aren't focused on fleshing out an entire sector or even an entire planet. We have a clutch of 6 uncharted and unexplored worlds set in a dangerous zone most people just avoid. In fact, more traditional world building has been done by Mullins for the war world of Troxen 7, which borders the Rot Worlds, than we've actually done for the Rot Worlds themselves. Just laid out all of the background lore on the Rot Worlds. There's 6 planets. They're somehow all connected. They're really dangerous. No one goes there. Done. World building over.
Fair enough.
The thing is, it doesn't have to be a thesis paper length. You know, you can go as in depth on it as you want. Well, yeah, but You know, it doesn't have to be. It can be as simple as like it fits on a little cocktail napkin. Like that's fine.
Exactly.
That's as long as you just nail down your ideas.
This world sucks. Number 1. This world sucks. Number 2.
Number 2.
This world sucks
because it's hot. This world sucks because it's cold. This world sucks because there's a plague. Done.
I'm thinking
This
of
world
that
sucks because
scene
it's covered in sand.
Wow. Hey, Anakin, slow down there. I'm thinking of the way that
Coarse
Marky
and it
was
gets everywhere.
the way that Marky was starting out, though. I was thinking of Half Baked. Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You're cool. Fuck you, I'm out of here.
Like, this world sucks and swallows. That's a Slanesh world.
Yeah, which one's that?
We don't come to this one. And we don't go to that one.
We don't come at this one.
Whoa. Whew. We got a little hot in here, boys. In this case, these 6 worlds have been named. Their little chunk of the Kandari subsector has been mapped, and we have developed just enough additional information to satisfy the needs for the campaign, while also hinting at the survey work that the Imperium would have done as a natural course as they settled the area. These 6 worlds are all jungle death worlds, orbiting a massive gas giant in the system's habitable zone. Evidence of ancient terraforming was detected by exploratory probes and forces, but each world proved to be more deadly than worthwhile. Essentially, they're too hard to colonize, so there's not really a reason to colonize them. And that does happen. The Imperium goes, maybe we'll move here later.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that was the Tau.
Exactly.
Not an issue, but we'll come back.
Yeah, they just become another footnote in the Mechanicus or Administratum's ledgers. They may be useful at some point in the future, but they're not really worth it right now. So let's move on. Like the Tau worlds.
Mm-hmm.
Since that hazy time, the exact date has been lost. These worlds have become home to feral human and feral orc populations. Lacking the means to get off their worlds, the Imperium has largely decided to ignore these populations, letting them war with and kill one another off. Although the oddity that all of the planets had somehow become infested with what seemed like the same feral tribes was also noted. It hardly seemed a pressing concern in light of more pressing matters, such as securing the subsector governor's personal supply of glad snuff. Very important.
Mm-hmm.
Higher on the priority list.
It's like fairy dust.
High on the priority list. I agree.
It's powdered Gladstone mixed in with your snuff, man. Come on.
Angel dust. ECP.
The rot worlds became a problem after the coming of the Cicadrix Maledictum, when a warp storm formed near the edge of the system. This wouldn't have been an issue of much note, except rumors of the Death Guard began to be whispered in the neighboring system of Troxen. But before the subsector governor Augustus Ramir could further investigate, the rot world of Troxen 7 was invaded by feral human barbarian hordes. These barbarians were armed with simple bladed weapons, such as axes and swords, clad in furs of jungle cats and the bones of defeated orcs, but pretty much nothing else. It was even uncommon for these warriors to be seen in battle carrying shields or wearing helmets. They often simply relied on their massive two-handed weapons, which had been designed over generations for killing feral orcs. What should have been a fast, bloody, and extremely one-sided conflict, however, became a massacre in an unexpected way. Although facing the discipline... What's up?
I was going to say, these sound like Diggin'
Pretty much. I mean, a lot of ways. They're just humans who have grown up, you know.
You're right. It does sound like digging knobs.
You've got 20 generations of humans who have been fighting 20 generations of feral orcs. That's a society.
They get big.
True story.
These are the Diggin' Knobs.
Yeah.
And digging knobs, for anybody who doesn't remember our other episode, whatever number, Marky, hit us with the number.
Episode 54.
That one. So
I wonder if that's
54.
true.
Are you sure it's not episode 69?
Doesn't matter. We're going with that one. It's 54.
I think it was like 12 or 13.
Yeah,
but
it was pretty early
54.
on. But digging knobs are humans who essentially think they're orcs.
Yep.
Paint themselves green. Yeah, go fight melee. Yeah, things like that.
I want a Diggin' Knobs army, dude.
That would
hilarious.
be dope. Just
It's one of those.
I mean, cat a chance.
Yeah, right. It's one of those like little lost pieces of lore that we definitely are digging into in the future.
Oh yeah, that would be a fun army to like just have as a like a house army for the channel or something. Just random Diggin' army.
Oh, speaking of, I told these guys, I think I told our patrons, I'm gonna make a bunch of people mad right now. I'm gonna reveal something that the patrons heard last time, but I'm thinking about buying the lion and specifically replacing his head with like a skull, like a mechanical skull, and making him the leader of the Legion of the Damned project that we keep talking about and never start.
Yeah.
Oh, like give him like a servo skull kind of looking head.
Yeah, make him help me out.
Knight Rider.
Ferris? No, the Primarch. Ferris Manus, the potential Primarch of the Lost and the Damned.
Yeah.
Legion of the Damned.
Legion of the Damned.
Yeah. Thank you, Marky.
And is that because he died first? I know that's super off topic for everything else.
Legion of the Damned is getting just like Diggin' Knobs. Legion of the Damned will get their own episode.
Yeah.
So
although dope, and I know I kind of get, the gist of it. I thought there was like more reason why people suspected Ferris.
There probably is. I don't really know a super large amount about it. It was just the thing that we had kicked around. The whole reason it came up was it was the thing we kicked around as being our like house army, the army that traveled with us to like conventions.
Right.
Would be the Legion of the Damned. But all right. So to get back on track here, although they faced the disciplined lasfire of veteran PDF troops, the barbarians, many carrying the blessings of Grandfather Nurgle, ignored all but the most grievous of wounds. Some even clawed their way back to their feet and attacked with teeth and clawed hands long after their bodies should have been declared dead. Here and there on the battlefields of Troxen 7, a single Death Guard legionnaire would stride among the charging barbarians, leading their crazed cultists as city after city on the world fell. No ships had been seen in the skies of the Troxen system. However, suddenly these forces just arised, as if flies drawn to a rotting corpse. And the system bent itself to one purpose, to hold Troxen 7, a strategic world at the mouth to the rest of the Troxen system at all costs.
Yep, Death Guard just showing up. Love it.
Like one death, there's 300 screaming barbarians and one legionnaire.
That's all I need.
And the entire PDF force or guard force falls primarily because these barbarians are taking fucking lasfire to their unarmored bodies and continuing to charge.
And they just keep coming.
Yeah. And a two-handed battle axe is going to much outweigh the effectiveness of fixed bayonets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Fixed bayonets.
Especially once they hit the ranks.
Is an improvised spear. That's all a bayonet is.
And as these barbarians win a conflict, they're obviously going to pick up, especially the more devastating weapons that they encounter. So, like, flamers are probably the first thing, because barbarians aren't thinking strategically. They're thinking what damages the most. So they're going to pick up flamers. They're going to pick up las cannons. They're going to pick up rocket launchers. Anything that makes a big, impressive amount of damage is what they're going to gravitate towards first. And the more times they win, the harder they are to fight. And there's poxwalkers and zombies with them. So it's just this like wave. It's this wave that should be easily defeated that's not easily defeated. And it turns Troxen 7 into a war world. And Troxen 7 separates the Troxen system from the Rot worlds. It's the planet on the edge. If you listened to our Mobian domain and Darktide episode, we talked about how the planet of, I almost said Alfarius Prime. Tertium. Tertium is the hive. What's the planet? The planet that Tertium is on, the system that Tertium is in, basically
I don't remember anymore.
There's a fringe war going on, and the system is stopped from expanding because of the fringe world, but the fringe is stopped from expanding into the system because of the fringe war. And this is the same thing. Troxen 7, for whatever reason, astronomically sits in an area that's a lot like the Cadian Gate. It's an area between the Rot worlds and the Troxin system, and it's one of the only passages that's really easy to travel. Or maybe there's a different reason.
We'll have to find out.
So speaking of that, unknown to the Imperium, Valdek 2, the only planet of the Rot Worlds to have ever hosted an Imperial settlement, is actually an ancient Eldari maiden world. Although, in the log absence of its Exodite wardens, the planet became a death world of massive dinosaurs and deadly carnivorous plants. Additionally, all the system's other worlds have been terraformed by the Eldari sometime after their civilization's fall, since the area of space now designated as the Carcosan sector is located near the edge of the galaxy and was at one point far removed from the influence of the Imperium. This clutch of worlds is also rich in minerals that could be forged into waystones or soulstones, and these minerals could be used to encourage the growth of new Wraithbone. However, the craft world that had been connected and set to foster these worlds fell to an orc Wa. While the orcs moved on after ransacking the craft world, they left it a ghost ship, drifting endlessly through the void. And eventually, the craft world became infested with feral orcs. These feral orcs coming from the spores that were left during the combat. These orcs accidentally activated one of the webway portals and then spread to Valdek 2, overcoming the human settlers that were there and obviously leading to the human barbarians. The rest of the planets in the Rot world are similarly all connected by webway portals to one another, which allowed first the feral human barbarian descendants of those early settlements to spread without the use of starships, and as the orc presence grew from generation to generation, the orcs just chased them. Essentially, they don't really know how to turn these webway portals on and off, so the webway portal get turned on, and then they just walk to the next world.
Just walk through it.
And so, as far as they're concerned, they're not even leaving their planet. And if you want to know how they're getting to Troxin 7, maybe there's another one. Or maybe it's Death Guard chicanery. We don't know.
A little bit of both.
It's always a little bit of both. So that's the world building of where all of this takes place, with a sprinkle of why all of it's starting to happen. But it doesn't lay out the antagonist. And that's because we don't really have one yet. We do. What we do have an antagonist. We're just not telling you. We're spoiler-free zone. What we do have is an inciting incident, and that's the arrival of the Dirge of Eternity, a space hulk of mostly ancient Necron tier origin that somehow contains the ruins of both a Lost Primarch's battle barge and an Arc Mechanicum, a prize that sends the entire sector scrambling for even a glimpse of what it might hold.
It's ugly. We know that.
Hey, man, I like my sketch. Excuse me, sir.
It is a sight to behold. Sure.
Yeah.
You don't know what direction it can go in.
You don't know if it's going forward
It's
or
space.
reverse.
It's every direction.
It doesn't follow the rule of
space,
maps.
In space, no one can hear your direction, Marky.
In space, no one can see your turn signal.
No one can see it.
Yeah, you have to think 3-dimensional, not 2.
That's no turn signal. What do you mean he's firing on us?
You know the worst paying job in the entire Imperium, right?
Plasma.
The poor guy who had to
Refuel the plasma reactor.
I was going to say the poor guy that had to install the turn signals in the Dirge of Eternity. Or no, wait, that's the most thankless job, not the most
Thankless.
You're a thankless.
Aw.
He's like installing it. He's like, they're not even going to fucking use
They're
it.
never going to use this. Why am I even here, man?
Right?
Where did I leave my...
I'm going to go back to my job at the BMW factory installing turn signals there.
Yeah, maybe they get more use.
Where's my turn light fluid?
Probably over
breaker?
there next to your breaker fluid and your light bulb repair kit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's in the aisle over from the muffler bearings.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oil changes, am I right?
did we get wait did we get to the point where you don't know what we're talking about anymore? Is that what just happened?
No. It's next to the ID 10T form.
Mm-hmm.
It actually goes like
The ID
To the top.
Yeah, ID10T, which is actually stored in a completely separate building than the DMBA 55 form.
You have to
Wow.
you have to keep them at least K18 away from each other, or
Yeah, look at that. Look at that thing, you Patreons that can see it.
it's a beautiful. You guys are bitches. That thing's magnificent.
If you don't-
complaining about it.
If you don't know what any of these forms are, it's a management thing. Go ask your manager what it is, and he'll tell you.
Yep.
or listen to what Kevin said and write the letters and numbers down and read it.
I was actually
so
pretty proud
advancing-
of that one. I had never actually heard
That was
before
good.
I pulled that one out of my own.
That was a pretty good one.
That was good. The IDT10 is pretty good.
ID10T has been around for a long time.
Yeah, ID10T is a pretty good one.
Yeah, you can adapt that one because you can be like, oh, just get me the ID10T cable. Like if you're working with computers, fucks with people all the time.
Off topic story. In my
Way
day
off
job,
topic.
somebody at our company asked about one of the customer service emails I was dealing with, and I said, I'm almost at the point where I'm going to send them that the problem with the kite exists.
An ID10T error.
No, it exists at the K18 mark. And the person I was talking to is like, what's the K18 mark? And I'm like, well, traditionally the K18 mark means that the problem exists 18 inches away from the keyboard. In this particular case, I mean 18 feet away from the fucking kite.
Yep.
And they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, the person doesn't know what they're doing. That's the aggravation I have right now.
Mhm.
Anyway. So advancing the story within a campaign structure. Like we laid out in our Crusade episode, there are a few different ways to design a campaign. They have largely been divided into two categories. Linear ladders, these would be the railroading adventures people complain about in tabletop role-playing games, and branching narratives, which are much more like the sandbox tabletop RPG method that you might encounter. While both have their uses, it's often more fun and engaging to play around with the idea of branching narrative trees. In the case of our community campaign, it allows us to track our Discord community game results so that Marky and I can twink how the streamed events play out in the future. It's important to point out that both campaign structure and scenario and story arcs are really heavily linked. So even though we mentioned them as two different pieces, we're going to kind of talk about them in an overlapping way. As we've mentioned a couple of times, Chuck and I are the ones who sat down and designed a lot of this campaign. However, we are now at a point where Chuck has done all he can, but since he's playing in the stream, we have removed his power, and now Marky and I are in control.
The Dirge is going to just shit on you, motherfuckers.
and as we talked about horror movie influence stuff, here we go.
It's Marky and I. As a quick refresher, though, if you need one, a linear ladder is incredibly straightforward. Battle or mission 1 progress to battle or mission 2. That progresses into battle or mission 3, and so on. The story advances between battles regardless of the who wins or who loses. The battles are set before the campaign, and they play in order regardless of what's happening. It's a video game structure. Mario goes from World 1-1 to World 1-2 to World 1-3, and no matter how many times you play, that's what Mario does. No matter how many times Mario dies or powers up, it never changes. That's essentially the idea. It's a linear story.
That's not going to be us.
Yep, not us. As an example of a branching narrative, players might meet in an opening battle. If the attacker wins, the players move to outcome 1. If the defenders win, the players move to outcome 2. If the attacker wins on outcome 1, the players move to outcome A. However, if the attacker loses, the players move to a second large battle. The same happens on the other side. If the defender wins twice, players move to outcome B. If the defenders lose, again, you branch back to that main battle structure. Basically, instead of a ladder or stacked battles, you have an opening battle that feeds into two choices, and the outcome of those games either feed back into another battle in which both forces are on equal footing again, or if the force wins twice in a row, the battle advances with them gaining greater favor, at least as it suits the story. They may not when we say they gain greater favor, we don't necessarily mean that they get like 2,000 extra points to play the next game with. We just mean that the story benefits them. In an example,
Or boons from the Chaos Gods.
right. As an example, if the campaign story you're telling is the fall of a castle, say you're telling the fall of Castle Angor, and the opening battle takes place in the Dead Marshes, and the attacker is an orc player, the defender is Space Marines. Now, Space Marines lose, the orcs advance. So because the orcs advance, you go from fighting in the marshes to fighting in the township or the city that's right outside this castle
The
monastery.
suburbs, essentially.
Right, essentially. So it's a city, it's a mild city fight. And then if the orcs win again, then the orcs are assaulting the fortress monastery itself. Now, if the orcs win the first one, but then lose the second one, the Space Marines manage to push them back to an even further outlying settlement. Maybe the Space Marines essentially have home field advantage. And you can tweak it a little bit by, the attacker, the winner of the last game, gets to choose, becomes the attacker and gets to choose what side of the battlefield they start up on, or maybe they get to place 3 pieces of terrain for every 1 piece of terrain or something like that. You can field it in that way, but mechanically, both forces in this structure are still the same. They don't have to be, but in what we just described, they stay the same.
So ours will be pretty simple. It's going to be mainly Imperium and Chaos.
Everybody's, well, the stream will be mainly Imperial and Chaos, but everybody has a reason for being there.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. Necrons might show up for no reason.
Good.
You never know. On the community campaign side of the Rot Wars, the first battle is called Planetfall, and it takes place on the world of Crove's Garden. Here is where we will dip into and mix in the scenarios and story arc portion of this. The attackers are looking to establish a foothold on the worlds that can act as a staging ground to launch missions to the Dirge of Eternity. The defenders are looking to hold their territory and repel any forces trying to make planetfall. If the attackers win the planetfall mission, the narrative branch will move to a mission where the attackers move to fully secure their forward operating base, while the defenders will become a guerrilla force trying to force them from their lands. If the defenders win the planetfall mission, the narrative branch will move to a mission where the attackers are now making a desperate attempt to tactically retreat from the world while the defenders are moving to destroy them completely. We're keeping the second mission currently under wraps, but this gives you an idea of our methodology and how we're thinking. Each set of 3 missions will satisfy a major part of the scenario, cueing Marky and me to release the next little bit of overall story arc. At the same time on stream, the players, Chuck and Kev being 2 of them, will go through similar set of missions on a similar branching narrative, with Marky and I looking at each of the community game mission results in order to change the missions and narrative that you guys see on stream. As an example, if an overwhelming number of Imperial victories are won by the community, one of the players using an Imperial faction on stream might get 500-point reinforcement of Imperial fists for either the first or last 2 turns of one of their games. They get a little bit of bonus. This is called an asymmetrical force deployment. It's something that we can play with, that you can play with. We'll talk about it a little bit more.
You got drop pods, right, Chuck?
Yeah.
When was the last time you used a drop pod?
You're going to use them soon.
Well, how long ago has it been since I met you? About 3 years ago?
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Trace years. Is Trace drop pods like Trace leches? Just crunchier.
Trace drop
Dude,
is.
I love drop pods.
So do I.
Dude, I was using drop pods when I first
so
started playing 40k, and it was always my favorite way to deploy my army.
Go surprise.
Yeah, not even like, because I know it was a little cheesy back in the day to use drop pods, but just the how it happened, and I used Stern Guard because I always thought special issue ammo was like super dope.
It is.
Yeah. And that's why I transitioned into Death Watch, just because the whole idea of Stern Guard and drop pods and Death Watch, like it rang true with how I play. So
I love it. You ask me what I got, I'll bring it.
all right.
That's if seeing, and that's what's gonna be interesting with the campaign. I don't know if we're jumping ahead, but there will be times when maybe Kevin's not playing the Imperium. Maybe I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Because somebody else will have to be playing their Death Guard.
Mm-hmm.
That's not me.
No, that's not you. Somebody else will have to play Death Guard or other things.
The Ruganist.
Well, and then I've also got Votan. Not very many, but Votan can show up. That's a possibility.
Yep, and those are not Imperial.
Yeah, they're technically Xenos.
They are scum.
With all of that in mind, more on the scenario and story arc side of the coin, we have to ask a few questions about the campaign and the games being played. Most importantly, why do the various factions of 40k give a shit? To satisfy this, we design and tweak the missions we will have our players use, both in the community and on stream, and we designed a few faction categories. In the Planetfall mission, the attacking forces will be, this is a faction category, the Imperium, the Drukhari, the Eldar Corsairs, the Gene Stealers, the Gene Stealer Cult, the Necron, the Tau, the Tyranids, the League of Votan, and all Chaos forces except for Nurgle. Their motivation is to secure a landing site so a forward base can be established. The defending factions or sub-factions, not sub-factions, the defending faction umbrella is over all Nurgle-aligned forces, Eldari Craftworld, Exodites, Yannari, and Harlequins, and the Orcs. In general, they all want to deny the invaders and disrupt their efforts. However, each army also has its own personal motivations for being there. To be clear, we're not saying that all attacking forces are aligned with one another, and we're not saying all defending forces are aligned with one another. We're just saying that if you're taking an Imperium army to play against a Nurgle force, you now know who's attacking and who's defending in the mission structure.
Mm-hmm.
To get on to the personalized faction details, examples of this would be the Mechanicus wants the Arc Mechanicum tech that's locked into the Dirge of Eternity. The Eldari know about the webway portals and want to protect them or destroy them or hide their existence at all costs. The Necrons believe the Dirge contains some lost Pharaon, while the Votan believe it contains an ancestor core. So all of these different factions have reasons for wanting to get to the Dirge. It just happens to be in a chaos-controlled part of space, really close to the Imperium's controlled space.
Yeah, and if you have like 2 defending forces or 2 attacking forces, you can always just use the generic roll-off and choose who's the attacker, who's the defender. It's like if you were both on like the attacking side of the umbrella, it's like, okay, well, these guys got here first, established a base, and now you're like, well, I need to establish a base, so I'm going to push them out or destroy them, vice versa. If you're 2 defenders, you're just on the planet, and it's a normal skirmish between forces that are already on that planet.
Or like the Eldari show up, and there's a bunch of orcs there because the orcs are like, oh, there's a bunch of feral orcs here, and then they're going to fight because they're going to fight.
Yep, you can pretty much just hand wave most of it. It's pretty...
We tried to give you enough structure so that you could kind of agilely jump from foot to foot.
Yep.
One might say nimbly bimbly from tree to tree.
While using these 2 steps and mixing them together quite a bit, the design process allows you to start playing with a lot of unique factors that make the scenario more engaging. Stories in games are often more rewarding when they have stakes that are stacked relatively high, and the outcome isn't guaranteed. Sure, you can slug out game after game in a campaign or a crusade, just like it's match play, but that isn't the fun of narrative. This is where you can use the missions to do things that aren't normally seen in matched or even open play. Stuff like tossing out primary and secondary objectives altogether, making up asymmetrical objectives, and even playing around with asymmetrical army sizes. Maybe a mission comes down to who can reach the Relic of Power and activate it first, or can the defender survive 4 rounds so they can escape? You can even design last stand missions where an entire army is going to die. The question is just how glorious will that death be?
Yeah, something I've always kind of wanted to implement is when you play your armies and you find out who wins, just, normal playing is you ante up a bit, essentially. So whoever wins gets a bit from their opponent. So like if it's a Imperial Fist, like Space Marine head, you give it to your opponent after you lose. Just everybody has bits lying around, and it's always been cool. Like I
do not.
I know I did that with Kevin one time with like with one of my shotguns.
That's how Billy got his gun originally.
Shotgun, yeah.
And then essentially how he also got his claw. But we made him work for it. He played, and in one we did the Death Watch. Was it after we were on the same team, or was it after we went against each other? And it just
we went against each other.
You guys
the one where we went against each other.
Mission.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, the training mission one. And then after that, he was awarded the shotgun for valiant service.
Yeah.
And then after he killed Gaz in combat, we're like, all right, he's getting a claw. He's turning into Yarrick now.
He's getting upgrades.
Yep.
So I've always liked that idea, and it's a fun little thing because I know a lot of people have bits lying around, and you don't have to do it. I mean, if your opponent is willing to do it, awesome, even better. If you're the only one willing to do it and they win, give them a bit. It'd be like a cool little thing. They can add it to their base. They don't have to accept the bit. It's just a fun little thing. I know I have a ton of bits lying around, and I just give Kevin or Matt or Chuck a Space Marine arm, and they can attach it to like one of the backpacks of their Chaos Marines, or the Tau can have a third arm shift out of his ass and hold a pulse rifle. I don't know. You can do with it what you will.
Or there could be a dwarf from Ickbard's army that's strung up behind my Necron leader.
Yeah, or you can have you can buy a Eisenhorn model and stand your Tau commander on top of it. Something like that.
I'd have to buy like 5. I've killed him a couple of times.
I don't know about that.
Rugen
clones. They're clones.
On that, Rugen has a Hellbrute that has trophies in the tentacles and all these different things that it's killed like out of the blue, and people have been like, I don't believe that just happened.
It's fun. It's definitely fun.
Trophies.
Yeah, so I always thought that was kind of like a cool little mechanic of, like people in card games, they ante up a card.
That's kind of what I was thinking. It sounded like old card game style, where like, oh, you lose. Here's the card that I was giving up.
Yeah, so I always thought it was a cool thing to try and mess around with, and something you can implement into your army that is like a trophy, something that wasn't just a match play game where you fight each other. So shameless plug, if you're a Patreon member, you can check out the video.
You can see Billy in all his glory right now.
Yeah, you can see his Deathwatch shotgun, or his it's Billy Blackclaw.
Yeah, Billy
or
Blackclaw.
Billy Bigcock. It's the Black Claw. It empowers the individual with to be well endowed.
Mentally, if not physically.
I was going to say, Chuck looked at me like, what? Yeah.
It's the big claw.
I was going to say, I thought I shared this story with you,
yeah,
Chuck.
I thought you heard it.
Right. My what do you call it? Conjugator? It takes a minute.
Broken.
Yeah.
Your conjugal visitor.
Cogitator works about as often as the McDonald's ice cream machine.
For those of you who haven't heard the story, the story of Billy Blackclaw, he killed a war boss, Blackclaw, and the Blackclaw is a relic for orcs that spreads their
endowedness.
What do you call it? Their spores. It spreads the spores like in abundance for whoever has the claw. Yeah, so they're like more brutal, and they spread spores like crazy. Whoever has the Black Claw. So when Billy attached it to himself, instead of spreading spores, his cock grew 10 times the size that day, and so he was now known as Billy Blackclaw or Billy Bigcock, and that's just it's just kind of the story behind it.
And considering he has mechanical legs because he got cut in half, I'm imagining like some weird Tetsuo Akira situation.
Well, he needs the robotic legs to hold up the massive cock he has between them. It's like a prosthetics. It was an enhancement because normal human legs couldn't hold him up.
Fucking love it.
When he lost his legs, he didn't. He only, it was.
He was flopping around on his dick.
Yeah,
just like an inchworm pulling him across the battlefield.
It was like a pogo stick.
But he lost his legs first.
He did. So he was already well endowed to begin with. So
Fucking love it.
yeah.
Kev, I don't know. You might be muted.
There we go. Right. I was saying what actually killed the Moloch was choking on his massive balls. It got his legs, and then it was like,
It's like, holy hell, what was that?
Ah, shit.
bit off more than he could chew.
Right.
So, without getting too deep into spoiler territory, we have fun planned for you guys in the community campaign. That's right, deep. And some designed for your watching pleasure. Asymmetrical objectives like secure the VIP, hunt the relic, and defend at all costs. We are also diving deep into the entire history of GW's released missions, so expect to see game types and battle layouts that herald from 2nd or 3rd edition and every edition up until now. Remember, nothing in this entire process requires you to design Crusade or campaigns just around the rules in the current release book. I think we've mentioned this a couple of times. It doesn't even have to be something that has any connection to Warhammer. You can decide that you want to play on a 6 foot by 8 or an 8 foot long by 4 foot wide dinner table and bring out as much terrain as you want and have a, God forbid, 3-way engagement, which I know GW was very surprised you could do because it had never been done before until they did it on Warhammer Plus.
Yeah,
that was my grind my gears thing for this.
Yeah, not to mention,
kidding me,
right?
Doing things like
Didn't we
city
do
fight
that like a bunch of times?
Yeah.
We did a bunch of 3-ways.
We're doing one right now.
Sorry. Beg your pardon.
So you were saying something about City Fight, Marky?
Yeah, I mean, I was.
I was. Get flashbacks to the last episode right now.
I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but City Fight is a system that isn't necessarily super used anymore. City Fight terrain was incredible. Terrain back in the day was dense enough that all of this like nice firing lanes for matched play wasn't a thing.
No, it was not.
They had rules for like roads where your vehicles would go faster on the road. Like you'd get like an extra 2 inches of movement or something like that for tanks.
3 inches.
Yeah, I kind of missed that.
And if you had Fleet of Foot, because you were Eldari, Necron, or something else, or Fleet of Claw, Tyranids, you got 6 inches or up to 6 inches. I think you got 3 assured, and then you could roll D3 to see if you could go farther. There are some crazy rules, and that's the other thing. You know, Marky had come up with a scenario when Beast and I had played my Exodite Eldar versus his Knights. Marky had come up with a rule that every round, or it wasn't every round. It was at the beginning of each player's turn that you did the meteor strike. How did that work? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so essentially what I did was I took a scatter dice from 5th edition and I rolled it, and whatever unit or area it was pointed at, that unit would
blast template.
Have a large blast template, deviate on top of it D6 inches, and whatever was hit took a mortal wound. If it was a knight, it took 10 mortal wounds.
Oh.
And we just played it out. And that's just, I lost
I think it was 2d6 mortal wounds, sorry, for a unit.
Yeah. I lost an entire unit, like round 1. And it adds randomness to the game. It brings up I think the scenario that Marky had come up with us for us to play in that narrative game was that the planet was like falling apart. Or like the moon was crashing into it or something. So it's this stuff that you can play with. And it doesn't have to be Warhammer related. If there's something really neat that you've encountered in a D&D game and you want to do it, figure out how to pull it over. Maybe you want to maybe there's an item on the board. And not that this isn't not something that's in Warhammer 40k, but this is definitely something that's been in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. Maybe there's a relic on the board that when it's picked up, it's going to give a big bonus to the unit that has it. Fucking run with it.
Run with it. And into the whole world building, I know I mentioned it, I think, before in a Patreon thing before, but everybody that's new that's listening, you can hunt down and try and figure out what 80s movies and cartoons the Omadon
100%.
system, the planets are from. One of them is a more recent one because Rugen helped me with it. But that's part of the whole thing, too. I think Ryan's getting at is like the inspiration of the draw for stuff. It's like you can take things from other areas and it's like, hey, we need to name planets.
Yeah.
So based on what type of planet it was, is what the name it was it got.
And we do this in our narrative games, and I'm sure it's going to happen during this Crusade, during the Rot Wars. And you guys, we encourage you guys as players, especially if you're playing with a little group or if you're playing with people who know what's going on, you know, if you're playing with a group who's in the know, don't bring somebody in and spring it on them. Well, no, bring somebody in and spring them on first game, but communicate before you do it. If there's a relic like Billy's shotgun or, Beast has a bunch of them where he's got a bunch of like named special weapons for his knights. That could be something that's acquired during the game. For instance, and this will lead into the end game topic, the last topic that we have, the last point that we have to talk about. That barbarian that's leading this army, that's leading this barbarian Nurgle army, maybe at some point he gets a Great Unclean One's sword. It's gifted to him. That's not something that a guardsman or whatever you're using might have. Work within the rules of the game, work with your opponent and let them know this is a special unit, this is a special weapon he has, this is why he has it. As long as it works within the mechanics of the rules of the game, then move forward with it. Another thing that happens with Chaos Champions a lot, as they progress forward through their path, they get more, lore-wise, they get more power, they get more armor, they get more stuff. They mutate. And you can do that with your Space Marine heroes too, or your Imperial Guardsman heroes as well, or your League of Votann hero as well. The more they progress through their battles, the more honors or the more special stuff they get. And the Crusade system has stuff set up for you to do this, but don't feel confined to that. Look out to the way that Mordenheim deals with collecting it. Look out to the way that Necromunda deals with collecting loot. If you want to make the loot process part of your experience, make the loot process part of your experience.
For a model aspect of it, what I think is cool, and I've already done it with a Marine that I've played with when we were practicing stuff and doing things with Tom's army, is as you play, you can change paint schemes. Well, Marines, probably Votann, probably most Guard, but, there's campaign badge decals. There's things like that. You can come up with things for whatever campaign or what you're playing. It's like, okay, this unit actually made it through it, or these actual 2 dudes never died in this unit. So as you go, they can get different paint schemes, different things added to them. To
hash marks added to their armor for kills.
It's like things to make your standard army that you have. Say you already have it painted and you use it in the campaign. This is a way to update your army, to make things stand individually out, to make people look at your army and go, "Why does it look like that? What happened?"
Like maybe you do a bunch of missions in the campaign, in the community campaign, and you're playing Imperial. Let's say you're playing Imperial Guard or you're playing Ultramarines or something, and you don't have a lot of basing detail down yet. You just kind of have what serve purpose for basing quickly. Now you've done this campaign and you've got an idea and you decide to put a little squashed Nurgling on a couple of bases, or even like Nurgle ooze on a couple of bases, and people are like, "Oh, that's weird. Why are your Ultramarines in this like weird, why do they have these weird Nurgle bases?" And then you can launch into, "Oh, well, I did this campaign." And
good conversation starter.
Well,
yep.
The end game is important in most stories. We've crafted reasons for every faction to be present, and while on the surface, it's pretty much an easy off-the-shelf reason. The Dirge of Eternity is a massive glittering prize for those who can claim it. It's often more fun to peel back a few layers and peer deeper into what might motivate those factions for playing out an entire campaign, however. This is also a great time to think about introducing overarching antagonists, be they things or be they people. Their intentions can be sprinkled into the backstory and lore, either being motivations that are identified early in the campaign or surprises and mysteries that have clues that were left throughout the narrative itself. In the case of the Rot Wars, we have some mysteries that will only be revealed as time goes on, but we do have two very obvious antagonistic forces. First off, the human barbarian and traitor guard forces of Nurgle, who swarm like flies over the Rot Worlds themselves and have started to attack the Troxan system. And the Dirge of Eternity itself, which looms like some impossible dark god's fortress, hiding its secrets within its twisted maze. The lives it has claimed are evident by the abandoned spacecraft that litter its hull. And as Marky puts it, most of them are Eldar ships, because Marky likes to fuck with me.
And there's Xeno scum, that's why.
Yep.
There's a human barbarian who has been gifted or blessed by Nurgle and is leading these forces. And what is his path? Obviously, some sort of ascent to demonhood, because he's able to at least talk to, maybe not necessarily order, but talk to Death Guard. And he's working with Death Guard, so he's probably not just a normal person. And he's obviously leading this traitor guard force that's growing and becoming a problem, and is now trying to secure the Rot Worlds. As the conflict that existed in the Rot Worlds was happening and the Dirge of Eternity shows up, the Dirge of Eternity's appearance is an inciting incident, but the Dirge of Eternity itself acts as an antagonistic linchpin. So even though it's not an antagonist, traditionally speaking, it is an antagonist by its mere existence. It sparks conflict. And one of those conflicts is going to be that this barbarian leader, barbarian warlord, is going to pull their forces back from the Troxan 7. They're going to leave enough forces on Troxan 7 to continue being a pain in the ass, but they're going to pull enough of their forces back, enough of their looted technology back into the Rot Worlds to try to secure the Rot Worlds, because Nurgle also wants the Dirge of Eternity. Everybody wants the Dirge of Eternity, and that's the easy thing. That's the easy surface level that I mentioned. Every single faction in the game, all 20 factions, have a reason to care about the Dirge of Eternity, and that's because it is a Space Hulk. And that's enough at the end of the day.
Oh, yeah.
But we've sprinkled in enough extras as to why one faction might need it more than another. And then, of course, the Dirge of Eternity also hides its own secrets and its own mysteries, some of which Marky and I know very well. Actually, some of it, if you go back and listen to some of our previous episodes, you might catch some hints of what the Dirge of Eternity hides. But the other thing that we get to play with, the other antagonist that we get to play with, that Chuck and I develop, as Marky and I develop the overall kind of end game, so to speak, of the Dirge of Eternity, Chuck and I are developing the end game of this barbarian leader. Is this going to turn into a massive demon that has to be defeated? Or is he going to turn into a massive demon? Or are they going to turn into a massive demon? We don't know if it's he or she yet. Or are they going to turn into a massive demon and escape the system entirely and go on to do other things other places?
Cause other problems.
Yeah, you never know. The Dirge of Eternity could have like this warpstone butt plug. Crazy.
That is not the hint that we talked about.
Oh God!
I just got to bring it full circle. That's
You gotta bring it.
It's literally
Just like
full circle.
Just like a butthole, it's a circle.
That's right.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think the antagonist is gonna be really fun developing. One, the lore, and two, all the different kit bashing that I get to do.
Oh yeah, man. It's going to be great.
That's the thing.
And it's fun. Nurgle is a great, all of the Chaos Gods are a great antagonist at the end of the day, but Nurgle is a specifically great antagonist to the story. Yeah, we're crafting because one, zombies, and two, like, you can play around with stuff like this. We can have normal ass humans with big ass swords that are surviving against guardsmen with las guns because Nurgle. And we don't have to explain it anymore.
Yeah,
Nobody knows
enough.
why.
That is the excuse. It's Nurgle.
Yeah, because Nurgle.
In all his blessings, whatever grandfather wants, I guess he gets.
That's right. That will wrap it up for this episode of Tales from the Hive. There is a lot more lore behind and intertwined within the campaign that we're developing, and we are getting ready to reveal that both through our stream and the community campaign itself. We'll also be releasing the streamed games as VODs on our YouTube page, so if you find this episode a bit later on, you should be able to catch up on the story or watch the entire thing now. Want to get involved with our community and see what else is going on? Join us on Discord. There we chat about 40k lore, the hobby, and tactics, plus Age of Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, creative writing, video games, role-playing, and so much more. That's also a place that you can immediately get linked in to all of the Rot Wars community campaign events going on now.
You can also share your short stories, spooky dookies, and lore with us either here on our email at underthehiveofmadness@gmail.com or gymdarkgaming@gmail.com. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or at underthehiveofmadness.com.
You can also like and review us wherever you get your podcast fix. Our home is Spotify, but we are on Apple, Google, Audible, Stitcher, and many, many more, including YouTube. Although YouTube is a little bit lagged behind. I think YouTube, we just released like episode 38. So if you want to stay current, this is where to stay current. We also have a Patreon set up at www.patreon.com/underthehiveofmadness. Patreon members get access to video podcasts with minimal editing, so you can see our beautiful faces and follow along with what we are looking at on screen, while hearing our bloopers in real time. All Patreon levels also get access to our quarterly painting contest, plus we have perks at higher levels, so go on over and check that out. Fulfill your need, the need for breakneck speeds. Ricketts Grav Boards, Innsmouth's #1 source for tech that straddles the razor's edge of life and death. Live life at the bleeding edge of what's left of your synapses. Free-falling into the endless black of a deep razor ice storm, we are the deathless daredevils of rebellion, 665.66 UHMR Chemrat Radio, reminding all of you Chemrats, Hive Mice, and Sump Ghoulies to keep those dials fixed right here, same ratty frequency, for the same ratty-ass attitude. The meat, they said. The meat is tainted. I didn't mind. I had started to enjoy the taste of long pork, even as I picked it from the claws of my 4 new shiny arms.
I like it.
Okay.
That's a wrap.
Was that creepy? Is that okay?